I'm Amber, 28 female. I live alone in a small but comfortable apartment in a mid-sized city, a place I earned through years of careful saving and a steady job as a financial analyst. My life has always been about structure, numbers, and logical consequences, principles that, until recently, I thought my family also understood. This story is about how I learned that blood isn't always thicker than water. And sometimes, the only way to teach a lesson is to let the consequences play out exactly as they should. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My first car wasn't a beauty. It was a 10-year-old sedan, a practical and entirely unremarkable vehicle that I bought with money from my first real job after college. It was gray, had a small dent on the passenger side door from a runaway shopping cart, and the radio only worked when it felt like it. But it was mine. I called it the tank. It had ferried me to job interviews, on first dates, through rainstorms, and on late-night trips to the grocery store. It represented my first real taste of independence, a four-wheeled symbol of my transition into adulthood. For 6 years, it was my reliable partner. Last month, I finally reached a point in my career where I could afford something new. Not a luxury car, but a brand new, reliable compact SUV with a warranty and a Bluetooth system that didn't require a secret handshake to activate. The day I drove it home, the new car smell filling my senses, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. I parked it in my designated spot at my apartment complex and took a picture, sending it to my best friend, Sarah, with the caption, "Look, I'm a real adult now." My plan for the tank was simple: sell it. It was still in decent running condition. The Kelley Blue Book value was around $3,000, maybe a little more if I sold it privately to someone who could appreciate its dependability over its aesthetics. That money would be a nice bonus, a little boost to my savings account, or maybe enough for a small vacation. I hadn't decided yet, but the possibility was exciting. That evening, I made the mistake of mentioning my new car during my weekly phone call with my parents, Carol and Tom. My mom's reaction was immediately effusive. "Oh, Amber, that's wonderful. You've worked so hard, you deserve it." My dad was more reserved, a typical grunt of approval that translated to, "Good, you're being responsible." Then came the question I should have seen coming. "So," my mom said, her voice shifting into a tone I knew all too well, the one that preceded a request disguised as a suggestion, "What are you going to do with your old car?" I told them my plan to sell it. There was a pause on the line. "Well, my mom started, your brother Jake could really use a car." My brother, Jake, is 20 years old and lives his life in pursuit of becoming a social media influencer. This means he spends most of his days making short, unfunny videos and the rest of his time complaining about how hard it is to get brand deals. He lived at home, rent-free, and worked a sporadic part-time job at a smoothie shop that barely covered his expenses for new clothes and camera gear. The idea of him needing a car was laughable. He needed a reality check, but that wasn't for sale. "He can buy it from me if he wants," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'd give him a family discount." "Oh, honey, he doesn't have that kind of money," my dad, Tom, chimed in, his voice firm. "He's trying to build his career. You've already got your new car, you should just give him the old one. It's the right thing to do. Family helps family." This was their classic maneuver. My dad would lay down the law with his "family helps family" mantra, and my mom would provide the emotional justification. For my entire life, my brother Jake had been the recipient of this warped logic. He was the baby, the one with potential, while I was the responsible older sister who was expected to pave the way and then hand over the paving stones. When I got my first laptop for college, they suggested I give my old one to him. When I moved into my apartment, they asked if he could have my old bedroom furniture. Each time, I had reluctantly agreed, telling myself it was easier than fighting. But a car was different. This wasn't a hand-me-down piece of furniture, it was a significant asset. It was $3,000. "I can't just give him a car," I argued, my grip tightening on my phone. I paid for it, I maintained it. I need the money from the sale. Amber, don't be selfish. My mom's voice was sharp with disappointment. We didn't raise you to be selfish. Think of how much this would help your brother. He could get to his auditions, his video shoots. It would be a game changer for him. His outie. Tian's were meetings with other aspiring influencers at the mall. His video shoots were him dancing in front of local landmarks. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Mom, Dad, I understand you want to help him, but this is my property. I'm not giving away a $3,000 asset for free. The conversation devolved from there. They accused me of being ungrateful, of flaunting my success while my brother struggled. They said I had changed, that my new job had made me cold and materialistic. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, and by the end of the hour-long call, I was exhausted and furious. They ended it with an ultimatum from my father. Think about what's really important, Amber. A few $1,000s or your family. I hung up, my head pounding. I called Sarah, who listened patiently as I recounted the entire, infuriating conversation. They're not asking, Amber, she said gently. They're demanding, and they're trying to guilt you into it. Don't do it. It's not your responsibility to fund Jake's influencer fantasies. She was right, of course, but the weight of their expectation was immense. For the next 2 days, they bombarded me with calls and texts. My mom sent old family photos with captions like, "Remember when you two were inseparable." My dad sent short, blunt texts, "Jake is waiting, and don't disappoint us." Jake himself even sent a text that read, "Heard you were gonna give me your car. That's so sick. Can't wait to do a reveal video." The pressure was suffocating. I felt cornered, emotionally blackmailed. Part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 28 years to be the good daughter, just wanted the conflict to end. The other part, the financial analyst who understood the value of an asset, was screaming in protest. Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, I caved. It wasn't a surrender born of generosity, but one of pure emotional fatigue. I called my parents and told them, my voice flat, that Jake could have the car. The joy and relief in their voices was sickening. They didn't thank me for my sacrifice. They congratulated me for finally doing the right thing. They arranged for Jake to come and pick it up the very next day. I felt a pit in my stomach, a cold, hard knot of resentment that I knew wouldn't go away anytime soon. I wasn't giving a gift. I was paying a ransom to get my parents off my back. The next day, Jake arrived at my apartment complex, his usual swagger in full effect. He didn't come to my door, he just texted, "Here." I looked out my window and saw him leaning against the visitor parking sign, scrolling through his phone. He was wearing designer sneakers that probably cost more than my first month's rent. The irony was not lost on me. With a heavy heart, I grabbed the spare key to the tank and went downstairs. The car was parked in its usual spot, looking as drab and dependable as ever. Seeing it there, knowing I was about to give it away, felt like a betrayal of my own hard work. "Hey," Jake said, not looking up from his phone. "Mom said you had the key for me." "Here," I said, holding it out. "Jake, listen. This car, it's old, but it's reliable. You have to take care of it. Check the oil, watch the tire pressure. It will last you a long time if you just..." He finally looked up, snatching the key from my hand. Yeah, I get it. It's a car." He walked over to the tank, unlocked it, and tossed his backpack into the passenger seat. He didn't look at me. He didn't say thank you. There was no acknowledgement of the fact that I was handing him an object worth thousands of dollars. To him, it was just another thing he was entitled to. "The title is on my kitchen counter," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I need to sign it over to you. Do you have a minute to come up and do the paperwork?" He rolled his eyes. "Seriously, I'm supposed to meet some people. Can't you just, mail it or something?" "It's the legal document that proves you on the car, Jake. We need to sign it at the same time and get it notarized. It's important." "Fine, whatever," he sighed, as if I were the one inconveniencing him. "Just handle it and bring it over to the house later this week. Mom and Dad will be there." Before I could argue, he slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and revved it aggressively. The poor old engine whined in protest. He gave me a mock salute and peeled out of the parking lot, the tires screeching. I stood there, watching my first car, my symbol of independence, disappear down the street, driven by someone who couldn't have cared less about its significance. I felt hollowed out, the anger and resentment from the night before solidifying into a cold, hard stone in my chest. I went back upstairs, my new car keys feeling heavy in my pocket. The certificate of title for the tank was sitting on my counter where I'd left it, a pale green document printed on heavy paper. It was a legal instrument, a piece of paper that held all the RIA. L Power. My name was printed clearly under the registered owner section. At the bottom was a space for my signature, the seller, and a space for the buyer's signature. Both were blank. I looked at the empty space for my signature, the place where I was supposed to officially transfer ownership. In my anger and frustration, I had completely forgotten to press the issue with Jake. My request for him to come upstairs was a last-ditch effort at forcing some formality, some respect for the process, and he had dismissed it completely. I picked up the title, folded it, and shoved it into a drawer with my other important documents, deciding I'd deal with it later. I just couldn't look at it right now. For the next few days, I tried to put it out of my mind. My parents called to tell me how thrilled Jake was, how he was already using the car to network. I gave them one-word answers. The peace I had hoped to buy with my capitulation felt like a sham. I hadn't bought peace, I had bought quiet resentment. The true betrayal came about a week later. I was scrolling through social media, a mindless habit to numb my frustration, when I saw a post from one of Jake's friends. It was a picture of Jake standing in a store, fanning out a thick wad of cash like a peacock's tail. He was grinning from ear to ear. The caption read, "My boy Jake just cashed in. Big moves only, hustle # get money." I stared at the picture, my blood running cold. That was a lot of cash. Where would Jake get that kind of money? He didn't have a job that paid in cash, and he certainly didn't have savings. A sick feeling began to creep up my spine. I clicked on Jake's profile. His own page was full of his usual cringeworthy content, but there was one new post from 2 days ago. It was a video. The thumbnail showed him standing in front of a junkyard, the kind of place with signs that read "Cash for Cars" and "We Buy Scrap." My hand was shaking as I pressed play. The video started with Jake talking to the camera. "What's up, everyone? So my sister gave me her old clunker. Super nice of her, right? But your boy doesn't do clunkers. Your boy does cash. So we're here to turn this old pile of bolts into some fresh stacks for the Content House Fund." The camera panned to show the tank, my tank, parked in front of the junkyard office. It looked so out of place. He then walked toward the office, the video cutting to a shot of him talking to a grizzled-looking man behind a counter. The video was edited with flashing dollar signs and hype music. The final shot was of Jake holding up a receipt and winking at the camera. That's how you flip an asset, people. Easy money. I dropped my phone. He hadn't even waited a week. He hadn't used it for his career. He hadn't needed it for transportation. He had seen my car, my first taste of freedom, my $3,000 asset, as nothing more than a quick and easy source of cash. He had taken my sacrifice and literally sold it for scrap. The fury that erupted inside me was white-hot. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the complete and utter disrespect. The blatant deception. My parents had guilt-tripped me, bullied me into giving my brother a tool to help him, and he had immediately melted it down for pocket money. The cold stone of resentment in my chest was now a raging inferno. I had been played by my entire family. For a full hour, I just sat on my couch, vibrating with a rage so intense it felt like a physical illness. My mind replayed the video over and over. Jake's smug face, the wad of cash, my car sitting forlornly in front of a junkyard. Every detail fueled the fire. He didn't just sell the car, he broadcasted his betrayal to the world, framing it as a savvy business move. He had turned my forced generosity into a joke, a piece of content for his pathetic social media channel. The hurt was sharp and deep, but it was quickly being overshadowed by the sheer, unadulterated fury. They had all lied. My parents knew Jake. They knew his history of get-rich-quick schemes and his absolute lack of work ethic. Their speeches about helping family and giving him a leg up were a complete sham. They just wanted me to solve their Jake problem. They wanted to give him something to placate him, and my car was the easiest sacrifice. They hadn't cared about me or my financial situation. They had used me. I stood up and started pacing my small living room, my mind racing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to my parents' house and confront all three of them. I wanted to show them the video and watch the smug satisfaction drain from their faces. But I knew how that would play out. They would defend him. My mom would say, well, it was his car to do with as he pleased. My dad would tell me to get over it, that it was just an old car and I shouldn't be so dramatic. They would twist the narrative until I was once again the selfish, ungrateful daughter. They would find a way to make his betrayal my fault. No, a direct confrontation wouldn't work. It would just be another frustrating, emotionally draining battle that I would lose. I needed something else. I needed leverage. I needed consequences. Real-world consequences that they couldn't argue their way out of. As a financial analyst, my brain is wired to think in terms of systems, rules, and documentation. Anger is an emotion, but a contract is a fact. A transaction requires proof. And as I paced, my brain, now shifting from pure rage to cold, analytical fury, started searching for a lever. What rule had been broken? What part of the system had failed? The car, he sold the car. How do you sell a car? You sign over the title. I stopped pacing. The word hung in the air, electric, the title. My heart started pounding, but this time it wasn't from anger. It was from a dawning, shocking realization. I ran to the drawer where I had shoved the document a week ago. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. I unfolded the pale green paper and stared at it. There it was, the certificate of title for the 10-year-old gray sedan. My name was printed neatly as the registered owner. And at the bottom, in the section labeled Transfer of Title by Seller, the line for my signature was pristine. It was completely, beautifully, wonderfully blank. I hadn't signed it. In my anger and emotional turmoil on the day Jake picked up the car, and in his arrogant dismissal of the paperwork, we had skipped the single most important step. He had been so eager to get his hands on the car, and I had been so beaten down that the legal transfer never happened. I had given him the keys, possession of the physical object, but I had never given him the ownership. I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, the title clutched in my hand. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. He didn't sell his car. He couldn't have, because it was never his car to sell. In the eyes of the law, and according to this official state document, that car was, and still is, 100% mine. My brother, in his infinite arrogance and ignorance, had just sold a vehicle he didn't own. The junkyard, in their haste to get a cheap car for scrap, had paid cash for a vehicle without properly verifying the title. Jake hadn't flipped an asset. He had sold stolen property. And he had been stupid enough to film himself doing it and post it online as evidence. The rage that had been choking me for the last hour didn't disappear. Instead, it transformed. It cooled, sharpened, and focused into a single, brilliant point. The emotional, messy family drama had just become a simple, clear-cut legal issue. And in that arena, feelings didn't matter. My parents' manipulations were irrelevant. Jake's entitlement was not a defense. All that mattered was the evidence. And I was holding the most important piece of evidence in my hand. I smoothed the title out on my kitchen table, my mind now clear and calm. The path forward was no longer a tangled mess of he said, she said. It was a straight line. The hurt was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but the feeling of powerlessness was gone. I had been a victim of their emotional blackmail, but Jake's own greed and stupidity had just handed me all the power. He thought he had hustled me out of a car. He had no idea what he had actually done. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had made a legal felony. And I, the responsible, rule-following, detail-oriented older sister, was going to ensure he finally faced the consequences of his actions. The game had just changed, and I was about to write the new rules. The first thing I did was call Sarah. I needed a clear head to talk me through this, someone outside the toxic bubble of my family. I explained everything, my voice steady and cold, from the moment Jake posted the video to the miraculous discovery of the unsigned title. "Oh my God," she breathed into the phone. "Amber, this is wow. He really is that dumb, isn't he? He filmed himself committing a felony, Sarah. He filmed it and put it on the internet for everyone to see." "So what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and concern. "Are you going to confront him?" "No," I said immediately. "Confronting him is what he and my parents expect. It leads to yelling and guilt trips and me backing down. I'm done with that. This isn't a family argument anymore. This is a transaction, a fraudulent transaction." As a high school teacher, Sarah was used to dealing with immature behavior, but this was on another level. "Okay, Analyst Amber, I see you. So what's the plan? What are the facts we need?" "First, I need to know exactly what happened," I said, my professional instincts kicking in. "I need to build a case. I need irrefutable proof of every step of this." My first move was to save the evidence. I used a screen recording app to capture Jake's video from his social media page. I saved it to my computer, my cloud storage, and a separate USB drive. I took high-resolution and screenshots of his friends' post with the wad of cash. I documented the dates, the times, the usernames. I was creating a file, just like I would for a financial audit. Next, I needed to confirm the sale. The video showed the name of the business, A&R Auto Salvage and Scrap. A quick search gave me their address and phone number. I knew I couldn't just call and ask if my brother had sold them a stolen car. I had to be smarter than that. I had to play a role. The next morning, I put on my most professional business attire. I drove to A&R Auto Salvage, a dusty, grim-looking place on the industrial edge of town. The office was a small, cluttered shack reeking of stale coffee and motor oil. A large, bald man with grease-stained hands sat behind the counter, the same man I had seen in Jake's video. I put on my best smile, a mask of polite corporate concern. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Amber. I'm a financial analyst and I'm helping a client, a young man, manage his finances. He mentioned he made a transaction here a few days ago, selling a gray sedan. His name is Jake." I was careful not to use my last name. The man, whose nameplate read Ron, grunted. "Yeah, I remember him, the video kid. What about it?" "Well, for his tax purposes, he needs an official bill of sale. The little receipt he got won't suffice for his records. He seems to have misplaced the one you gave him. Would it be possible to get a duplicate copy?" I made my voice sound slightly exasperated, as if dealing with an irresponsible young client was a daily chore. Ron sighed, annoyed. "Kid should have kept his paperwork. We don't normally do this." "I completely understand," I said, pulling a $20 bill from my wallet and placing it on the counter. "I would be so grateful if you could just find it. It would save me a huge headache." His eyes flickered to the money. He grumbled something under his breath and then started rummaging through a messy stack of papers on his desk. After a minute, he pulled out a carbon copy of a bill of sale. He made a quick photocopy and slid it across the counter, pocketing the 20. I took the paper, my heart hammering. "Thank you so much, you're a lifesaver." I walked back to my car before I let myself look at it. There it was, date of sale, vehicle identification number VIN, and the price. Jake hadn't even gotten a good deal. He'd sold my $3,000 car for $700 in scrap metal value. The sheer stupidity of it was staggering. He had torpedoed our relationship, committed a felony, and embarrassed our family, all for $700. The bill of sale was signed by Jake as the seller. This document, combined with the title in my name, was the smoking gun. It proved he had represented himself as the owner and sold my property. My next step was to understand the legalities. I knew what he did was wrong, but I wanted to know exactly how wrong. I spent the evening researching my state's laws regarding vehicle titles and transfers. The language was clear and unambiguous. A sale is not valid until the owner signs the title over to the purchaser. Selling a vehicle without a title, or with a title that is not legally in your name, constitutes fraud. And since the value of the property was over a certain threshold, which $3,000 certainly was, it wasn't just a misdemeanor. It was a felony. The final piece of the puzzle was my parents. I needed to know, for certain, what they knew. I waited until the next evening and called my mom, affecting a tone of confused hurt. "Mom," I started, "I saw something weird on Jake's social media. Did he sell the car?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, that," she said, her voice a little too casual. "Yes, he did. He found a great opportunity, Amber. He sold the car and he's investing the money into his business. Your father and I think it was a very clever move. He's showing real initiative." My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "You told me he needed it for transportation. You guilted me into giving it to him because he needed it." "Well, needs change," she said dismissively. "This was a better use for it. It was his car, he could do what he wanted with it. Honestly, you should be proud of him. He's thinking like an entrepreneur." There it was, the confirmation. They knew. They had known all along, or at least they knew after the fact and had already constructed a narrative to justify it. They were complicit in the deception. They were not innocent bystanders, they were co-conspirators. That was all I needed to hear. I ended the call politely, my mind now icily resolved. My investigation was complete. I had the video evidence. I had the fraudulent bill of sale. I had the official title in my name, and I had verbal confirmation from my mother that they supported his actions. I had a complete, airtight case. Jake hadn't just sold a car, he had sold my car. My parents hadn't just pressured me, they had facilitated a crime. The money trail didn't choose T lead to Jake, it led straight back to my parents' doorstep, to their culture of entitlement and enablement. And I was about to shut it all down. With my folder of evidence, digital files, the photocopied bill of sale, and the pristine, unsigned title, I felt a strange sense of calm. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind a cold, clear landscape where a single path was visible. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not in the hot-blooded sense. It was about restoration. It was about re-establishing the rules of reality that my family had worked so hard to bend and twist. My plan had two phases. Phase 1 was containment and control. Phase 2 was the execution of consequences. For Phase 1, I went to my bank. I explained to the branch manager, a woman I had a professional relationship with, that my car had been sold illegally without my consent and that I would be reporting it stolen. I asked her to put a note on my accounts and to be aware that I might be receiving a large, unexpected sum of money in the near future from an insurance claim or a legal settlement. This was to preempt any strange looks when I potentially tried to recover my losses. It was a small step, but it made me feel like I was taking control of the narrative in every aspect of my life. Next, I called my auto insurance company. I took a deep breath and chose my words carefully. "Hello, I need to report a stolen vehicle," I said, my voice firm. I gave them the make, model, and VIN of the tank. The agent on the other end was sympathetic and professional. "Okay, ma'am, can you tell me the date and time you last saw the vehicle?" "I last saw it on Monday, August 4th, at my apartment complex. A family member had borrowed it." "Borrowed it?" the agent asked. "Yes," I said. "He had permission to use the keys. He did not have permission to sell it. I have just discovered that he sold the vehicle to a salvage yard for cash. I am the legal owner, and the title was never signed over. He sold my property without my consent." There was a moment of silence on the line as the agent processed this. "I see. Ma'am, the first thing you need to do is file a police report. We cannot proceed with a theft claim until there is an official report filed with law enforcement. Once you have a case number, you can call us back, and we will begin the claims process." This was exactly what I had expected. This was the gate I needed to pass through. The insurance company's protocol was now forcing my hand, making the next step not just a choice, but a requirement. It was perfect. I couldn't be accused of being vindictive or overly dramatic. I was simply following procedure. Phase 2 began with a family dinner. This was the most difficult part of the plan, as it required me to sit in a room with them and feign ignorance. My mom called on a Wednesday, inviting me over for their traditional Sunday roast. "We haven't seen you since you gave Jake the car," she said cheerfully. "Come over, we'll have a nice family meal." "I'd love to," I said, my voice sweet as poison. For the next few days, I rehearsed my lines. I prepared myself for their smugness, their casual dismissal of my feelings. I needed to be a blank slate, an observer collecting final data before presenting my findings. When I arrived on Sunday, the atmosphere was thick with a self-congratulatory air. My dad was watching sports, my mom was humming in the kitchen, and Jake was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone, probably counting the likes on his ridiculous video. "Amber, so good to see you," my mom said, wiping her hands on her apron and giving me a hug. It felt like hugging a stranger. Dinner was a masterclass in denial. They talked about Jake's burgeoning career and the smart investment he had made. "You know, that $700 is going to be seed money for a whole new series of videos," my dad said, gesturing at Jake with a fork. "It's about financial independence. Your brother has a good head on his shoulders." I just smiled and nodded. "That's great. I'm glad he's being so resourceful." My words were hollow, but they didn't notice. They only heard what they wanted to hear. Jake, for his part, was insufferable. "Yeah, it's all about the hustle," he said, not even looking at me. "You gotta know when to sell. That old car was just a dead asset. I liquidated it. It's basic economics." "I see," I said, taking a calm sip of water. "And the junkyard, they just handed you cash. They didn't need any paperwork. Like the title?" I let the question hang in the air, a perfectly casual inquiry. My dad, Tom, scoffed. "Places like that don't get bogged down in red tape, Amber. It's a cash business. It's efficient." My mom nodded in agreement. "It's all sorted. Don't you worry about it." This was it, the final confirmation. They were either completely ignorant of the law or, more likely, they simply didn't think the rules applied to them, or specifically to Jake. I lived in a world of their own making, where consequences were for other people. I continued to play my part through dessert. I asked Jake about his video ideas. I complimented my mom's cooking. I discussed the weather with my dad. On the outside, I was the dutiful daughter. On the inside, I was a judge reviewing the final evidence before passing sentence. As I was leaving, my mom hugged me again. "I'm so glad we're all on the same page about this," she said. "It's so much better when the family is in harmony." I smiled at her, a real smile this time. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, a smile of impending victory. "Me too, Mom," I said. "Harmony is so important." I drove home, the calm resolve settling deep in my bones. I had given them one last chance to come clean, to show a shred of remorse or understanding. They had failed spectacularly. They had doubled down on their narrative of lies and entitlement. They had toasted my brother's success, a success built on theft and deceit. They had no idea that their cozy, self-justifying world was about to be shattered. The lesson in ownership was about to begin, and class was officially in session. The next morning, I would be walking into the police station. Monday morning, I woke up before my alarm. There was no nervousness, no hesitation. There was only a quiet, focused determination. I dressed not in my usual corporate attire, but in simple, conservative clothes, dark jeans, a plain blouse, and flat shoes. I wanted to look like a credible, serious citizen, not a vengeful executive. I put my folder of evidence into my satchel, the weight of it both grounding and empowering. The local police precinct was a sterile, imposing brick building. Walking through the automatic doors felt like crossing a threshold into a different world, a world of black and white rules where the shades of gray my family loved to live in did not exist. I took a number and sat in a hard plastic chair, waiting for my turn. The air smelled of disinfectant and bureaucracy. When my number was called, I was led to a small cubicle where a uniformed officer sat behind a computer. He looked tired and overworked. His name tag read Officer Miller. "How can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice flat. "I need to report a stolen vehicle," I said, my voice even and clear. He sighed, a barely perceptible sound of someone who had heard this 1,000 times. Okay, license and registration for the vehicle, and your driver's license, please. I slid the documents across the desk. I had made copies of my car's registration and my insurance card. I also handed him my driver's license. He typed the information into his system. Okay, a gray sedan, he said, reading from his monitor. When and where was it stolen? This was the moment of truth. The situation is a little complicated, I began. He looked up from his screen, his expression shifting from bored to faintly interested. The car wasn't taken by force. I allowed my younger brother to borrow it. However, he then sold the vehicle without my knowledge or consent. I hold the title, which was never signed over to him. He misrepresented himself as the owner and sold my property. Officer Miller leaned back in his chair, his eyebrows raised. He sold it. Yes, sir, to a salvage yard for cash. I have a copy of the bill of sale he signed, and I have video evidence of him admitting to the act, which he posted on social media. I opened my satchel and laid the contents on the corner of his desk, the pristine title in my name, the photocopy of the fraudulent bill of sale from A&R Auto Salvage, and a printout of a screenshot from Jake's video. I told him I had the video file on a USB drive as well. He picked up the title first, examining it closely. He looked at my name as the owner and the blank signature line. Then he picked up the bill of sale, noting Jake's signature. He stared at the documents for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And you're certain you never gave him permission to sell? He asked, his voice now sharp and serious. I am 100% certain, I said. In fact, my parents pressured me to give him the car for his use, not to sell. My brother and my parents were all aware of this. When I questioned my mother about the sale, she confirmed he had done it and that she and my father supported his decision. Officer Miller steepled his fingers, his eyes boring into me. He was no longer a tired bureaucrat, he was a cop assessing a crime. So, your brother sold your car, and your parents are complicit in covering it up. That is my belief, yes. He was silent for another minute, then he turned back to his computer and began typing, his fingers moving quickly. Selling a vehicle you don't legally own is a crime. Depending on the value of the vehicle, it can be a felony. You understand that by filing this report, you are initiating a criminal investigation. Once this process starts, it's out of your hands. The District Attorney's Office will decide whether or to press charges against your brother. I understand, I said, my voice unwavering. And you are willing to testify to these facts in a court of law if necessary? Yes. He nodded slowly. Okay. He spent the next 30 minutes taking my official statement. I recounted the entire story, from the phone calls pressuring me to give Jake the car, to the discovery of the video, to the conversation with Ron at the junkyard, and finally to the family dinner where they all admitted their knowledge and support of the sale. I was calm, factual, and precise. I left out the emotional turmoil and focused only on the provable facts. When I was finished, he printed out the statement and had me sign it. He gave me a card with a case number on it. A detective from the auto theft unit will be assigned this case, he said. They will likely be in touch with you within the next few days. They will also be paying a visit to A&R Auto Salvage and to your brother. I thanked him, collected my things, and walked out of the police station. The sun seemed brighter. The air felt cleaner. I had done it. I had taken the messy, painful family drama and handed it over to the one system designed to deal with it. The gears of justice were now turning, slowly but surely. The call came 2 days later. It was my mother. Her voice was a high-pitched shriek of hysteria. Amber, what did you do? What did you do? I kept my voice calm. Mom, what are you talking about? The police, 2 detectives were just here. They were here asking about your car. They went to the junkyard. They want to talk to Jake. They said he sold a stolen car. You told them it was stolen. How could you do this to your own brother, to your family? I didn't do anything, I said coolly. Jake sold a car that didn't belong to him. That's a crime. I reported a crime. The police are handling it. It's a very simple concept. "You're going to send your brother to jail over an old car," she screamed. "I didn't send him anywhere. His own actions did, and so did yours. I seem to recall you telling me it was a clever move and that you were proud of him. You can tell that to the detectives when they interview you." There was a choked sob on the other end of the line, followed by my father's booming voice. "Amber, you call them back right now and you tell them this was all a misunderstanding. You fix this." "There is nothing to fix," I said, my voice like ice. "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a felony. Goodbye." I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. The confrontation was over. There was no screaming match, no guilt trip that could work on me now. I had built a wall of legal fact around myself, and their emotional attacks simply bounced off it. They could no longer touch me. The consequences were finally arriving at their doorstep. The weeks that followed were a maelstrom of activity, just not for me. For the first time in my life, I was on the outside of my family's drama, watching it unfold from a safe, quiet distance. The detectives were incredibly efficient. They interviewed Ron at the salvage yard, who, facing potential charges for receiving stolen property, quickly provided a sworn statement about Jake's visit and his lack of a signed title. They impounded what was left of the tank from the junkyard as evidence. Then they paid a visit to my parents' house. Jake was formally arrested. It wasn't a dramatic scene like in the movies. They simply showed up, read him his rights, and took him to the station for processing. He was charged with felony theft by deception. My parents had to scramble to find a lawyer and bail him out. The cost of that alone was several times more than the $700 he had gotten for the car. The irony was exquisite. My parents, Carol and Tom, were also brought in for questioning as accessories after the fact. The detectives had my statement about their complicity, and their initial attempts to lie and claim ignorance crumbled quickly. Their story that it was a clever business move didn't hold up well under professional interrogation. They were not charged, but the warning they received from the detectives about obstruction of justice left them terrified. The real fallout, however, was social and financial. News travels fast in a small community. The story of the influencer who stole his sister's car became a local gossip topic. Jake's already meager social media following evaporated, replaced by a flood of mocking comments. His hustle culture brand was destroyed overnight. He was a joke. Faced with a mountain of evidence, including his own video, Jake's lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. The felony charge was reduced to a gross misdemeanor. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a hefty fine that my parents had to pay, 200 hours of community service, and most importantly, full restitution to me for the value of the vehicle. The court valued the tank $3,200 based on its condition and market value. The first restitution check arrived in the mail a month after the sentencing. It was a personal check from my father's account for $200, with "for Jake" written in the memo line. The plea deal stipulated a payment plan that would take them over a year to complete. Every month, I would receive a check, a tangible reminder of the consequences of their actions. I did not speak to my parents or my brother throughout this entire period. They tried to reach me through other relatives, sending messages that I was tearing the family apart, that I was cruel and unforgiving. I ignored them all. I continued my conversations with Sarah, who acted as my emotional rock, and I focused on my work and my own life. The quiet in my life was profound. The constant hum of anxiety and obligation that had been my background noise for years was finally gone. About 6 months into Jake's probation, I received a letter. It was from my mother. It wasn't the hysterical, blaming screed I had expected. The tone was subdued, exhausted. She wrote that Jake was working a full-time job at a warehouse to pay his fines and restitution. He hated it. My father was working overtime to cover the legal bills. The stress had taken a huge toll on them. She wrote, "I don't understand why you had to do it this way, but I understand now that we were wrong. We should have listened to you. We should have respected you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the closest I knew I would ever get. I didn't write back. The real resolution came on the day I deposited the final restitution check. I now had the full $3,200 in my account. The money felt different from my salary. It wasn't just earned, it was reclaimed. It was a symbol of my restored independence. That evening, I took the unsigned title, the document that had started it all, and my folder of evidence to the small fire pit on my apartment balcony. I sat and watched as the papers curled, turned black, and dissolved into ash. I was letting it go, not the lesson, but the anger. My relationship with my family is not repaired, and it may never be. The trust is gone. But in its place is a new foundation of respect, a respect that was born not from love or obligation, but from the hard, cold reality of the law. I drew a new boundary, not with words, but with actions. They now know that my kindness is not a weakness and my property is not their resource. I still live my life by the principles of structure, numbers, and logical consequences. And I have finally taught my family that those rules apply to everyone. I am no longer just the good daughter, I am the one who holds the title.